Hey, what's good, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. Nelson89. I am Nelson89 coming at you guys with another video for this week. And today's video, I wanted to talk about my top alternative metal albums. And I decided I was going to pick some of my favorite albums that fall in line with alternative metal. I'm probably going to break it up, maybe 2 or 3 parts, because there's quite a few albums that I want to talk about. So this will be the first part. And for those of you who are maybe wondering what is alternative metal or what is alt metal, well, basically it was a term that was started being used around in the early 90s, where it was describing a bunch of metal bands who were mixing in different musical genres within their style. You know, funk metal was a genre that fell in there. Rap metal, uh, pretty much anything, any type of style that wasn't normally associated with metal music that was being used by these bands. Me personally, I just look at it as a term that was used to describe a bunch of heavy rock bands, whether they be metal or just hard rock, just a bunch of rock bands that you really couldn't pigeonhole. You know, these were bands that had metal influences, but they also took inspiration from other genres. And a lot of labels and a lot of people within the music community didn't know how to categorize them. Because one minute they might have a thrash metal riff here, and then the next thing you know, they're being funky, or they might throw in like a progressive rock lick or country or bluegrass. It was just a bunch of bands that had those metal influences, but they were also taken from other styles of music and put it in all together. And that's basically how I sum it up. Maybe not quite as good as Wikipedia, but that's the way I viewed it. But anyway, without further ado, I just want to get into like first five CDs that I got here that I consider to be some of my top favorite alt metal albums. So the first one I want to talk about right now is, y'all probably are not surprised by this one, because this is a particular album that I talk about quite a lot, and that is Mother's Milk by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Hope y'all can see that. I know there's a glare right there. Yeah, released in 1989. This was the band's fourth album. This was their fourth album. This was their breakthrough record. This was the album that really catapulted them into being from being a to being a cult underground band in Los Angeles that were playing small clubs. When they dropped this album, they ended up becoming rock stars. Basically, they went from playing those small venues and being more of an underground cult band to being a mainstream successful band that started playing in arenas and stadiums. Like, this album right here really took them to the next level. And of course it was their next album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, that turned them into the superstars that they are now. But this was the record, this was their first hugely successful album, and it's my favorite Chili Peppers record. I think it's their best record. I think it's their heaviest album. This is the only time that you could really say that the Chili Peppers were metal. There's a lot of metal influenced riffs on this album, and they managed to do a great job at blending that metal foundation, mixing it and blending it with other styles of music. Because of course you get that funk rock style from their earlier records, but they're also blending it with psychedelia. They're blending it with punk, as well as some jazz influences. So it's just a great mixture. It's just a great mixture. And also don't let me forget about rap too, because Anthony Kiedis, he's still rapping at this point on this record. But this was also the first album where he started to sing a lot more. And I did a podcast episode where I ranked the Chili Peppers albums from worst to best, from 1984 to 1991, and this one was number one, of course, because it's my favorite one. And I go more in depth about what I really enjoyed about this album. So definitely check out that episode whenever you get the chance. But yeah, My first pick is Mother's Milk by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, released in 1989, and this is the 2003 reissue by Capitol Records. So it's got a whole remastered sound, and it's got some really cool bonus tracks at the end too. But yeah, Mother's Milk by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. All right, so the next album for my pick on this particular episode is Faith No More's The Real Thing, released in 1989 as well. Uh, this is the band's third album, and it was their first album with Mike Patton as lead vocalist. So this record was a huge hit for Faith No More. It put them in the mainstream eyes, and "Epic" is one of Faith No More's best known songs. I guess it's their most popular song. It's the one that most people know them for, and it was that song and this album was highly influential to a lot of bands, especially later on in the '90s. So many rap metal bands looked at this album and this band as a huge influence to them, helping develop that subgenre, for better or for worse, because there were some good bands in that genre, but there was a whole lot of bad bands in that genre as well. But this record, this is the one that most of those bands always point to as being a huge influence. It's either this record or Rage Against the Machine's first album. But just an awesome record. And I would say this album, compared to Mother's Milk by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, this album was more metal. It's more metal, but they definitely blend in so many different styles. I mean, Roddy Bottum, the band's keyboardist, he's able to add like those, like that foundation, that those eerie keys in the background of the music. Uh, they do all kinds of genres, man. Of course, Epic is one of the earliest, rap metal songs, because Mike Patton raps a lot of the verses. Then Surprise You're Dead is like a heavy thrash metal song. Probably the highlights on here is probably tracks 5 and 6, Zombie Eaters and The Real Thing. Uh, the heaviest tracks on the album, very heavy and atmospheric and kind of dark and eerie. Both of those tracks are awesome. Awesome points on the album. But this whole entire album is really good, man. There's even a song on here where they actually play around with carousel music, called Woodpecker from Mars. They even play around with carousel music. And then the last song on the album, Edge of the World, is a freaking jazz lounge song. It's not even a metal song. So it's just amazing how they was able to blend all those different styles. And the funk is there too. There's a lot of funky rhythms in there as well. And they do an awesome cover of Black Sabbath's War Pigs. I think that's one of the best War Pigs covers I've ever heard. But definitely a awesome album, a legendary album. So many bands were influenced by this record. A lot of new metal bands were influenced by this, whether you like them or not. But I'm just saying, a lot of them look to this record as being a huge inspiration into so many bands, like digging that style and developing it so much more throughout the '90s. So yeah, Faith No More, The Real Thing. That's my second pick. And for my third pick, uh, I guess you could say this is a bit of an odd choice, maybe, but I picked "Time's Up" by Living Color. Their second album, released in 1990. Yeah. So some of you might be wondering, well, why didn't I go with Vivid? Because Vivid was it was way more successful. The Cult of Personality was a huge hit. That's Living Color's signature song. So why didn't I go with Vivid? I mean, even though I think Vivid is a great album, I think that Time's Up was better. It was a bit better. And I think it gets overlooked a lot. I think it's constantly left in the shadows of Vivid. But I think Time's Up was a more of an ambitious work for the band. They really started to add in different type of styles on this record. I mean, the funk is still there and the hip hop influences from the previous record, but not only that, man, but there's even moments of them going like sort of thrash metal or crossover thrash, like on the title song, Time's Up, which kicks off the album. And then you have the song called Love, Rears Its Ugly Head, which is more of like a bluesy hard rock song. Something that I don't think the band really touched those grounds on Vivid. That you have Elvis is Dead, which was one of the singles from the band and one of the most funkiest songs on the record. And Solace of You. Solace of You is another great highlight on the record because it's not even a metal song. It's more like a Caribbean world music influence type track. It's not heavy at all, but th- I mean this album just really showed what the band was capable of. It really shows that there was more than them just being a hard rock funk metal band like on the previous record. It really showed the lengths of creativity and where they could take their styles. So that's why I wanted to pick Times Up because I think it's a bit more of an over excuse me, I think it's a bit more of an improvement over Vivid. Like I said, I think it's more of an ambitious album compared to Vivid. They really they really took risk on this record. They really took a lot of risk on this record, is what I'm trying to say. So that's why I wanted to pick it. I wanted to give this album some shine because I think it's criminally underrated. I think it's been held in the shadows of Vivid too much, and people seem to overlook this record. But definitely a great record of the '90s. Probably one of the best metal albums of the '90s in my opinion. So yeah, that's my third pick. Times Up by Living Color. And for my fourth pick, probably another odd one. Uh, some of you might be wondering why I didn't go with the previous record, but I just wanted to give this album some shine because I think it's another underrated one, and I think it's the best. I think it's one of their best records. This is Fishbone. Give a monkey a brain, and he'll swear he's the center of the universe. That's the full title, or you can just go by the short title. Give a monkey a brain. This was Fishbone. This is Fishbone at their heaviest right here. Lots of heaviness on this record. Now they do revert back to their ska and punk roots on a few songs, but for the most part, it's a lot of heaviness on this record. I mean, the first four songs on this album are pretty much well, the first three songs on the album are pretty much metal songs. You know, from Swim, Servitude, and Flowers. And Black Flowers is actually one of the most beautifulest songs I ever heard from Fishbone. I think it's one of their best songs. I don't really hear a lot of people talk about it that much, but it's if you never heard Black Flowers, definitely go on YouTube and listen to that song. It's awesome. You'll see what I'm saying, man. Uh, so many great songs on here, and then Properties of Propaganda, where the band really goes back to their funk roots. Uh, what's another one on here? The One for Your Breath has more of like a crossover thrash vibe, or even you might could even call it a thrash metal song. Uh, Drunk Schizo, another more kind of crossover thrashy type song. Then you have In the Rain, which is more of like a melodic rock, hard rock track. No Fear, uh, just just an all around great song, man. Excuse me, just an all around great album. You know, great mixture of that heavy metal, as well as the funk and some R&B influence, as well as their ska punk and hardcore roots that Fishbone came from. I always looked at this record as more of an extension of the previous record, The Reality of My Surroundings. But I would say to Give a Monkey a Brain is more of the it's more of the abrasive and maybe less radio friendly version of that record. But they definitely get more heavy on this record, man, and they do a nice blend and mixture of all these different styles, while also having that hard rock and heavy metal foundation throughout most of the record, man. So that's why I wanted to pick Give a Monkey a Brain because I think the record gets wrongfully overlooked because of a lot of the things that were happening with Fishbone at that time. It wasn't really a good it wasn't really a good period for the band at this point. But they definitely turned out a classic record with Give a Monkey a Brain. So if you've never given this album a chance, definitely reconsider that and check it out because you won't be disappointed. So last but not least on this list is White Zombie, the Sexorcisto. This is the fourth album by White Zombie, but it was their first major label album. Yeah, they had what 2 or 3 albums before this? Yeah, They had a couple albums before this. Soul Crusher was before this, and then Make Them Die Slowly. So actually, this was their third album. Yeah, this was their third album actually. Yeah. Uh, yeah, Soul Crusher, Make Them Die Slowly, and then this record. Yeah, so this was their third album actually. Astro Creep was the fourth album. But sometimes I have a hard time trying to decide which album do I like better. Do I like Le Sexorcisto or do I like Astro Creep? Because there's some days where I consider Le Sexorcisto my favorite White Zombie album. Then there's another day where it's like I don't know. I think Astro Creep might be my favorite. So I'm a bit conflicted with the two. But in this case, I think that Le Sexorcisto. What I like most about this record, this album in particular, is that the band actually took. Well, they didn't. I don't want to say they took a risk, but they. I think that this album represents alternative metal a lot more than what Astro Creep did, because Astro Creep, for the most part, is an industrial metal album. That's what Astro Creep is. To me, this album is more of a representation of alternative metal because not only do they implement groove metal a lot heavier on this record, but they also add in the more psychedelic uh, influences. They add that in, and there's a little bit of sludge metal and stoner rock, and even Rob Zombie's vocals on some songs, man. Like the first track on here, "Welcome to Planet MF." His the way he delivers his vocals on that song is kind of has a quasi rap type approach to it. Not saying that he's rapping on the song, but it's just the way that he delivers his vocals and his approach on that track. It just has this kind of quasi rap appeal to me, which is one of the reasons why I got into this band. When I first heard that song, it kind of sounded like to me he was rapping a little bit on that song. But there's just so many different elements that they added to this, to this album. And they were able to just kind of mush it all together, and they came up with their own unique sound, which is why sometimes I kind of argue that even though Astro Creep was a really great record, and on certain days it's my favorite White Zombie. That's why I always argue that Le Sexorcisto was actually the better album because they actually presented a more interesting sound. Because me personally, I haven't heard any other band sound quite like this, like they did on this album. There's only one band that I can think of, and that's a band called it's a band called Animal Bag. Uh, yeah, it's a band called Animal Bag, who will probably be on my next top alternative metal videos and list. But that's the only band that I can think of. Other than that band, I have yet to hear any other band that was able to blend in all those different styles of like psychedelia and groove metal and you know uh stoner rock and a little bit of sludge and doom and some doomy in some parts. Not dooming like Saint Vitus Doom or like Cathedral Doom or Candlemass Doom, not like that, but there's just some really slow and more like sludgy parts that comes with a lot of these songs. I guess sludgy is more of the appropriate way to describe some of those slower parts on these songs as opposed to doom. But to me, it's just a great mixture of all those styles blended together and how they were able just to come up with a very unique style that set them apart from other bands at that time. Because you have to understand when this album dropped, it gave White Zombie the distinction of being one of the few bands to actually have their videos played on both Headbangers Ball and 120 Minutes back in the day on MTV. Those of you who don't know, 120 Minutes, that was the more alternative uh, video program, and there were only like a handful of bands that actually got the distinction to be played on both that show as well as Headbangers Ball. And White Zombie was one of those bands when this album dropped, man. I mean, if you look at them, they don't really look like your typical, metal band. I mean, he's got dreadlocks, and they have this like quasi kind of '60s looking image. yeah, they didn't look like your average metal band at that time. So a lot of like MTV didn't know where to put their videos and so forth. But yeah, definitely a great record. Uh, one of the best. One of the reasons why I say that Rob Zombie's solo stuff doesn't really hold up to White Zombies. I mean, sorry, man. This album, Astro Creep, as good as Hellbilly Deluxe was, man, I don't think none of his solo albums have come close to being above uh, this album or Astro Creep, man. But just really dig the Sex Sisto, man. Those heavy riffs, those groove laden styles that they presented, man. The psychedelic approach, everything was just good about this record. I think it just had all the makings of a good alternative metal record that helped set them apart from what other bands were doing in metal at the time. Uh, so that's my last pick for this particular video. I'm definitely in the process of working on more picks for my next video pertaining to this uh, particular genre because alternative metal is actually my favorite. That's actually my favorite type of metal because I'm hugely into '90s metal. That's I think that's probably my favorite era of metal was the '90s. Don't get me wrong, I listen to '80s metal. I listen to stuff in the '70s. I listen to a wide range of metal music, but the '90s that's my favorite era. And the reason why alternative metal is my favorite style is because what really set me on the journey was when I bought the video games GTA San Andreas. That video game had a in-game radio station called Radio X, and it introduced me to Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, uh, early Rage Against the Machine, because I had never heard Killing in the Name until that video game, and it even introduced me to Faith No More, because Faith No More was on that radio station as well. Living Color, a lot of these bands that have become my favorite now they were first introduced to me through that game. So that's why I have a particular soft spot for this particular era of metal. But that's all that I got for you on this episode and this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're somebody out there that's not familiar with a lot of these records, please go out and check them out. You won't be disappointed. I highly recommend them. Uh, these albums could possibly be your gateway into listening to heavier music because I know these albums were my gateway into going into more extreme, rock and metal music. But as always, hope everybody here out there is having a blessed day and a blessed week. And as always, love, peace, and music. Have a great day. Peace out.